This is the fourth of a 5-part series on the economic analysis of the beer industry and the rise of the microbrew. And as we go through these series, we're continuing to use KNIME to simulate these economic dynamics and use the market simulation nodes introduced by scientific strategy. In this fourth phase, we're really looking at mass marketing. And as we look at this economic history of the beer industry, we see that branding brings about a new type of differentiation called horizontal differentiation. And we have yet another KNIME workflow to illustrate this market dynamic. Now you remember in part 3, we had vertical differentiation. Vertical differentiation was when all consumers perceive a product as being better than another product. And that happened because new technology, pasteurization, refrigeration was introduced, and the leaders that introduced that product created an objectively better beer. And that better beer could win over 100% of their customers and effectively wipe out those smaller, slower competitors. But fast forward and think about what happens when all of those slow competitors were eliminated and we're just left with the major leading breweries. At that point, all the breweries all had pasteurization and refrigeration. So everybody again is making the exact same kind of beer. We've eliminated the differentiation, everyone's the same, and the beer is now back to being a commodity, right? Commodity means price pressure, pressure to consolidate, more pressure to cut costs, all right? The beer industry needed to reinvent itself once again to be profitable. And they did that with mass marketing. And this is what mass marketing looked like. We saw all of the major breweries latching on to sports teams, to comedians, to models, to whatever element they thought might appeal to their consumer base. Now this image is important. It's a history piece. This image is from 1987. But put that aside for a moment because I want to talk about some statistics, and we'll see that from 1950 to 1980, the marketing in the beer industry increased tenfold, from 51 cents a barrel to over $5 a barrel. That's a tremendous change in the way these products are marketed. Now the image. So the question is, does this image change your view of the brand? Right. Some consumers are going to find this image very appealing, and this is going to increase their willingness to pay for the product. They're going to be more attracted by Budweiser. Other consumers might be offended by this, and those consumers are going to punish Budweiser by reducing their willingness to pay and by buying their competitive products. So let's look again at the timeline. Our phase 4 really happens down here, where we just have a few major breweries left. There's tremendous consolidation being driven by the lack of differentiation again. And at the end of this period, there's just going to be the 4 major breweries. So those breweries are trying to break out with mass marketing. Now let's look at how this mass marketing impacts these willingness to pay curves. You'll remember from part 3, we had this histogram, and we plotted all the willingness to pay of all our customers on this histogram. So customer A had a very low willingness to pay, customer Z had a very high willingness to pay, and all the other customers fell somewhere in between on this normal distribution. So how will marketing impact this curve? Well, Budweiser introduced their campaign, say that they were neck and neck with Miller before this campaign. After they introduce this campaign, they might get a slight bump. We see that curve just shifting a little bit to the right because there is more energy around this brand. There's more interest, there's more excitement around the brand. But that's the vertical differentiation, but we're not talking about that. We're not focusing on that. We're focusing on the horizontal, which is really a reordering of consumer preference. So let's dig into that a little bit and explore what that means. So focus on customer E and customer G. So they were maybe Miller customers in the past. They saw that Budweiser ad, the image I showed you earlier, and they had an epiphany. They realized that all they needed to do was drink Budweiser and they would be surrounded by beautiful women. So this was a very appealing brand promise that Budweiser provided for them. It raised their willingness to pay and they became brand loyal for Budweiser. Now, on the other hand, there were two other customers, customer U and customer V, that saw the same image, but in this case, it was highly offensive, an unappealing image, and they punished Budweiser by lowering their willingness to pay. They were not interested in the brand. So effectively, what we see here is these four customers swapping positions. We see this shuffling, this reordering, this randomization of this customer distribution. And that's what horizontal differentiation means. It means that customers now disagree about what's better. Right? Before everyone was lined up, now there's this reordering. And we measure horizontal differentiation by looking at the correlation between these two willingness to pay charts. As we introduce more branding, the correlation becomes more and more distinct. And we really separate these two brands. And they regain, in a sense, the monopoly power that they used to have. So if we're going to ask what market share would we expect, well, customer U and V with the high valuation relative for Miller would continue to buy that product, and G and E would buy product 2, Budweiser, and because of that slight vertical differentiation, everyone else follows along. But that is not the story. Now, Miller's brewing president and COO described this phenomenon very succinctly. He said 30% of consumers will not buy an Anheuser-Busch product and another 30% would not buy a Miller product. So you can really see that polarization separating those two markets and providing both competitors with market power. Now, as we've also seen, horizontal differentiation is really mathematically described by the correlation between those two customer distributions. Now, here's another question. Is vertical differentiation or horizontal differentiation better? Well, if you were the market leader, you probably wish that everyone saw your product as being objectively better. That way you would gain 100% market share. But if you're a market follower, then you're probably very grateful that there is vertical or there is horizontal differentiation in the market. That means that you've got brand power, market power over at least some of the customers in the market, and you can win those over. Now, I would also say that horizontal differentiation is probably more sustainable than vertical differentiation, because vertical differentiation, as we saw in stage 3, only required the other competitors in the market to install the same technology, to copy the market leader, provide the same level of objective value, to eliminate that form of differentiation. Now here's our KNIME workflow. As before, you can download this workflow and try it yourself on the KNIME Analytics platform by following the link below. When we switch to KNIME and try and explain mass marketing and branding using a market simulation, the market simulation becomes much more complicated. This is quite a different simulation to what we've seen before. We've also added a number of new nodes that you haven't seen before. So we have a differentiation vertical node, we have a differentiation horizontal node, we've got a matrix distribution node, and we've got a price war node. So 4 new nodes that we've added to this market simulation. Now the premise of this simulation is a little complicated. We're trying to add both marketing and branding, and we've made a distinction between the two. So with marketing, we're just trying to raise awareness, so raise the value of the the products through awareness, and through branding, it's trying to do something different. It's trying to distinguish one brand from another. So when we're raising awareness, we're increasing our vertical differentiation. When we're raising or distinguishing the products, we're adding horizontal differentiation to the two. And that's what these two nodes are. Now this matrix distribution node is working to take input from both the vertical and horizontal and make sense of it all. Combine these distinctions together and create new willingness to pay part worth distributions. So let's look at how that works. Let's first jump to the product features, as we always do. So we have our two products, but now each product has three features. The original beer feature, which is undifferentiated. Remember from part 1, customers cannot distinguish one product from another. They all taste exactly the same. We've added pasteurization to that. That was great in the last part when we were adding new technology. We were adding vertical differentiation, but now we've eliminated all the small players and there's just the major brands left, and everybody has pasteurization. So again, we've eliminated any sort of differentiation. We're back to commodity products. So the last feature is the brand. Now the brand is differentiating. We've got product 1 has one unique brand and product 2 has another unique brand. And as before, we're going to try and fill in the cost here. A couple of other changes. We've increased the price. Now the price of both products are $2. So these beers, you can think of these as really Miller and Bud. They're locked together. They're really very similar in everything they do, but they command relatively strong price points and high margins. And there's the cost of providing these features. The cost of providing an undifferentiated beer hasn't changed. It's still 50 cents, and the pasteurization is 10 cents again from the last presentation. Now we have to go back and look at the mean value and the brand correlation. So these are the additional factors that we're providing. Again, we're calling this the marketing. We're raising the awareness. We're raising the mean value of these products through our marketing campaigns, and we're distinguishing the two products. So let's open both of these. What we're doing over 21 periods, the mean value of our marketing is going to go from 0. We haven't started when we this is 1940s, to the end of this period where we've added $1 of value per beer that customers are going to appreciate and consume. So the mean is going to increase. That's the marketing awareness. And let's look at the conformity or the horizontal differentiation. Again, over the 21 years, we're going to decrease conformity from 1 to 0. So remember, horizontal differentiation is defined by the correlation between the willingness to pay customer distributions. So in the beginning, there's perfect correlation. Customers cannot distinguish the first product from the second product. They look identical. But by the end, in terms of the branding, these brands look completely different. Completely different. So we'll see, this is where we'll see the most lift in profitability. So we run these through. Let's open up the results. So I'm comparing here the mean and the conformity or the correlation. And these are our 21 iteration periods. So the mean value, the value of both beers is going to steadily increase over these 21 periods, and the conformity is going to steadily decrease until customers believe these beers are totally different products. Now this counter here is going to select each stage, each iteration. It drives the iteration. So there's 21 stages from 0 to 20. And let's have a quick look at the output here. So the counter is going to go from 0 to 20. So it's really just a lookup value, and at each step in the loop counter, it's going to pick the next value. Let's reset this loop counter. We'll start running. So we're going to pick out the first iteration. We're going to pick the first value from both the mean and the correlation. We do that here. I'm going to run it all the way through here. Right, so we pick the first value as 0. The new mean is 0. We've added no value, and the new horizontal differentiation is, or correlation is 1. The products remain identical. And when we see this, right, so both products, the brand adds 0 value, and when we look at the correlation, the product's going to be the same. So we're adding no value here. So we're just starting. Now I'm going to run this one time so you can see what happens at the next stage. It's going to make a little more sense. So now we've added 0.5. The brands are becoming a little more valuable. And let's look at the correlation here. So the correlation between the two products, the brand of the two products, is still very high. They're almost perfectly correlated, but 0.95 means that these products are now becoming different, distinguished in the minds of the consumer. Now I'm going to explain what this price war node does, and it's going to do a lot of the work for us. So in the past, we picked the price. That was a profit maximizing price, and what this price war node will do is it'll essentially run a competitive price war for us, in which both products, product 1 and product 2, are both striving to maximize profitability. And they're trying to cut each other's throat with price until they find that profit maximizing point. And when we run this, you can see, we'll run this one time. There's a lot of fields here. So product 1, product 2, you can see the profit maximizing price is going to be 66 cents. And the cost is going to be 65 cents. So we drove price, or both products drove price down to marginal cost, as expected. In the first stage, these are still virtually commodity products. Now I'm going to just run this whole market simulation here. It's a little more complicated, and this price war takes some time to run, but we're going to do that. Now this market simulation is finished. We've iterated over the 21 years of marketing and branding investment, and what we've got here in these charts is for product 1, we're comparing the price and the cost. Let's look at that. And so the cost is increasing. We're adding more and more investment. We're investing more and more heavily in our marketing and branding, but at the same time, our price is starting to peel away. So we've got a greater return on that investment as we continue. Starting down when the products were commodities, we couldn't make any money, but by the end of this branding campaign, at the end of the 20 years, we're making quite a bit of margin per product. When we look at the quantity trend, we'll see that both products split the market. And then now let's look at profitability here. And we see that profit for both companies is increasing, right? So starting at iteration 0, this is when both products were commodities. There was nothing really distinguishing them, and price was driven down to close to marginal cost. But after we've invested in this branding, these products are becoming distinguished in the minds of the consumer. We're adding both market value, market awareness, and brand value, and that's mixing the correlation that customers see between the customer distributions, between the willingness to pay. And what that means is we're building market power over those customers that are attracted by our product, and that's how we're profitable. So that's the end of part 4. In the final part, part 5, we look at the introduction of the microbrews, and we see that microbrews discover a new type of differentiation called strange differentiation.